I've played tons of NES games, and I've covered a fairly wide range of topics concerning NES games, and I'll inevitably do the same for other systems as time goes on. That's the beauty of what I do. There's so much out there to talk about, and the only limit I have in my life is time, and I love spending that time with you all. But today's episode is interesting. We're going to talk about every single NES game that had a TV show aligned with it. But before we get started, I do want to say this will be live action shows, not cartoons, and also not game shows, because I've already done that. That episode will be linked down in the description below and at the end of this video. Let's begin. Created by Glenn Larson, the genius behind The Fall Guy, Magnum P.I., Battlestar Galactica, and Buck Rogers in the 25th century, Knight Rider was a huge deal back in the early 80s. The whole story of the show was that Wilton Knight, a self-made billionaire, rescues this detective, Michael Long, that got his face fucked up in a gunfight. The actor being David Hasselhoff, who was renamed as Michael Knight, and he's a government agent, drives around in a car named Kit, aka a souped-up Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. What a show. 4 seasons, by the way. And because it was a badass show, you already know, and I'm sure we'll see this a few times today, one of the triumvirate of bullshit, we're bound to do something with it, be it LJN, Ocean, or Acclaim. In this case, it was Acclaim who hired Pack-In Video to develop it. Now, the game isn't that bad, it's just road blasters if we were inside the car and things were shooting at us. My dad actually played the hell out of this one, but I never bothered checking it out. And provided that the devs didn't even include the most iconic theme song of the 80s in their game, I'm not in any rush to do it. Airwolf. Now, that's a show that rocked. In fact, most of the shows that the NES games that we're going to talk about today were based on, they were awesome. And if you grew up in the early 80s, you knew all about this show featuring a very advanced prototype supersonic helicopter. Yeah, wrap your head around that one. Because the show was so stupid popular, it had quite a few games tied to it, over 9 unique games that spanned from the Commodore 64 era all the way to the Genesis. By the way, if you've played a game called Crossfire on the Genesis, just know it was Super Airwolf on the Mega Drive. Now you know. But the NES version was again pushed out by Acclaim and developed by someone who had no fucking clue how to program games to attract an audience. And those fine people were Beam Software. If you can think of a shitty game on the NES, it was probably them, or Micronix, or maybe even Toze to some capacity. It's not horrible, per se, but I could sit down and play it. Next up are 4 different games that follow one of the most important childhood TV shows out there, Sesame Street. Sesame Street goes all the way back to the late 60s, where the theme song gave you some grossly inaccurate representation of New York City. Yeah, sunny days, sweeping the clouds away, on my way to where the air is sweet. That's fucking weed, kid. Weed, smog, and sewage. The holy fucking trinity of New York City. But as an educational program, it only made sense to bring educational software to the kiddos. But here's something you might not know. 2 of the games are actually compiled ports of older games that were released for the home computer. For example, Sesame Street 1, 2, 3 is all about numbers, and the cartridge has Ernie's Magic Shapes and Astro Grover, again, both of which were released on home computers. Then we had ABC, the same principle, Let Her Go Round and Ernie's Big Splash were also released on home computers. So if you had both of these games, you essentially had 4 PC games on the NES. And in 1991, ABC and 1, 2, 3 were combined into one game that had all 4. Pretty neat if you ask me. The 3rd and 4th games were independently created and published by High Tech Expression, who, if you've watched my previous episodes, you'll know didn't have the slightest clue how to appeal to any demographic, which was kind of their undoing. Countdown is just a number game. You focus on running and leaping around as Count Von Count, finding different numbers, and following different rules depending on the game mode you selected. It's actually really not a bad game. Aria enjoyed it for what it is, and occasionally she plays it as well. So if you have a kiddo that wants to learn math, or basic identification of numbers, this is a great one. The final game was pretty interesting, Big Bird's Hide and Speak, which was an edutainment title that taught kids recognition, memorization, and reading skills. Now, why is it interesting? It was one of the first games to use digitized speech on the NES. From the ground up, it's a basic run-of-the-mill game of hide and seek with a hint of Memory, the card game, but instead of cards, we have different characters hiding in Big Bird's trap house. Not to be confused with the far more superior aerial demonstration team of the United States Air Force. Thunderbirds was an interesting show created by Gary and Sylvia Anderson, who used super marionation to bring a lovely franchise that caught people off guard. We saw these lifelike marionettes being voiced over, and it was like a puppet show that had quality to it. Think of it as Team America World Police before Trey Parker ever got a wild hair up his ass to make two groinless puppets have sex. I will say the merchandise for this game was insane. You'd have these big-ass scale models of the aircraft that the Thunderbirds would fly. I believe even Micro Machines had a toy line that aligned with the show. It was a time to be alive. But as expected, someone had to make a game out of it, and it was destined to be a vertical shooter, and that's what it is. The mechanics of the game are actually kind of neat. You have 60 days to take out this douchebag alien named Hood, and we could choose 5 different aircraft, but you can only take 3 hits before that aircraft is grounded. If that happens, you lose 3 days to get the vehicle repaired. Remember, you only have 60 days, so you can't waste too many days trying to take out Hood. You know, it blows my mind that people don't like Fester's Quest, but adore Blaster Master. I think Fester's Quest is fine, and personally I fucking hate Blaster Master, but that's an opinion, I guess. To be honest, at the time, I didn't like Metroidvanias, and even though I do enjoy them now, Blaster Master's bullshit still left a bad taste in my mouth. Now you might be saying, when the fuck did Uncle Fester go on his own quest? You'd be right in asking that. The game's premise has nothing to do with the 60s era TV show after all, it's just the character being ripped from it. And if we went even further, the show itself was a newspaper cartoon strip. It's funny to see that a long-running panel cartoon led to 3 different mainline TV shows, crossovers, and 5 different films. While we're on the topic of members of the Addams family doing stupid shit on the side, there was also a NES game based around Pugsley called The Addams Family: Pugsley's Scavenger Hunt. Now, this one is based on the 1992 animated series, which I was old enough to maybe remember as a blur, but I certainly don't remember it as an adult. Apparently it was on ABC, but I never remembered ABC having cartoons. Personally, I watched Disney, Cartoon Network, and Kids WB. But the pretense of the game is simple. Pugsley is challenged by Wednesday to find stupid shit around the house, and you might be thinking, hey, this was on the Super Nintendo. Well, in name, it was. But the NES game is actually based on the first Addams Family game. And instead of Gomez, we play as his awkwardly obese jizz spawn. But between me and you, the SNES game with the same name, mind you, is better. Who would have ever thought a gang of puppets would become something so much bigger? I remember the Muppets growing up, and that was in the 90s, but Jim Henson, he brought this crazy idea to life in 1955, and from that point, anything and everything that could be created using the Muppets IP was created. From movies to TV shows to merchandise, it's very much still alive. The game, however, it was Muppet Adventure Chaos at the Carnival. It's actually the second game in the Muppets franchise, the first being Pigs in Space for the 2600. The game originated on the Apple II and was released for most computers of the era, but the one console to get a port was the NES. There are 4 levels, each with their own little mini-games tied to characters we know, such as tubing with Kermit, escaping a funhouse with Fozzie, flying a spaceship with Gonzo, or driving bumper cars with Animal. Once you complete these, you go after Dr. Grump, and then you beat it. It was developed by Mind's Eye Technology, which as far as we know, this is their only game, and it doesn't help it was published by High Tech Expressions. Got ourselves a sitcom here, situational comedy if you will. A big one too if you watch TV around the late 60s. Gilligan's Island was created by Sherwood Schwartz. Say that 10 times fast. It's the same guy who brought us the Brady Bunch. The show is simple. Some people went on a tour on the SS Minnow and shit went horribly wrong and they ended up shipwrecked. Every episode involves them surviving on a day-to-day basis, with all progress consistently sabotaged by the goofiness of Gilligan, played by the late Bob Denver. What's cool is that the game was developed by Human Entertainment, and it seemed exactly like an episode of the show. Through 4 levels, you would guide the skipper trying to find things to escape the island, while dealing with the aloofness of Gilligan, and no, it's not a good time. If you're a fan of televised wrestling, then you already know there were quite a few games released on the NES that covered the topic. The two big brands were WCW, or World Championship Wrestling, and WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, but let's go ahead and start with WCW. Now, some of you might be wrestling connoisseurs, so I'm gonna try to get this right. A long fucking time ago, around the time of the Civil War, a time that also brought us A1 steak sauce, yeah, wrap your head around that, people figured out that men throwing men, that was fucking exciting. And because of that, throughout history, tons of little territorial-based wrestling promotions popped up, such as All-Star Wrestling in Vancouver, Championship Wrestling from Florida and Tampa, or Big Time Wrestling all the way up in Detroit. But there were two that succeeded more than the others: the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in New York and the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling in Charlotte, courtesy of a guy named Jim Crockett. The former would go on to become the WWF, the later would become the WCW. Now, I'm not going to break it down any further than that because I'm really not a wrestling fan, but I do know that the 1990 NES game was kind of fucking dog shit, because most wrestling games of the era were fucking dog shit, but it's less shit than the WWF ones by like 10%. And now let's talk about the WWF games, because there are 4 of them. The first was WWF WrestleMania, which has 6 wrestlers: Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, the Honky Tonk Man, Bam Bam Bigelow, and the $1 Million Man himself. It's basically a slapfest of bullshit, and I hate it. Then we had WWF WrestleMania Challenge, which was a little bit more ambitious, but still vehemently annoying, because it was isometric, and if you know me, I loathe isometric games. Then we had WWF WrestleMania Steel Cage Challenge, which marked the transition from Rare developing wrestling games to sculptured software, and it had a little bit more in the realm of moves, but that steel cage blocking my view was a huge pain in the ass. The final game was WWF King of the Ring, which, if I had to choose one game to play out of all of these, it would be this one. It's probably the best of the worst, and I'm sure you all have positive memories of this, but I don't. Contrary to most games that stemmed from TV shows, The Lone Ranger actually started off as a radio program on WXYZ Detroit, and people ate that shit up. I can just imagine someone sitting next to the radio and thinking to themselves, this is the future. The general plot of the show is that the Lone Ranger stems from a group of ambushed Texas Rangers, and the surviving one, John Reed, decides to become a vigilante, riding his horse Silver and working with a Native American named Tonto. It's not a bad franchise at all. Naturally, with it being a big deal, Konami secured the rights to make a video game out of it. There's 8 levels, and you have to do specific things in each stage to progress, but honestly, it's Konami, and Konami didn't really mess up in the early 90s. If you want a solid game, check this one out. As a kid, I was raised on Star Wars. Anything else? Unacceptable. So because of that, I never cared to learn about Star Trek, and the one time I tried to watch the show, I couldn't really get into it. But the original series, it started all the way back in 1966, and while there are plenty of games that aligned with the franchise, Star Trek 25th Anniversary directly aligns with the original series. The game starts off on the USS Enterprise near the planet Sigma Iota 2, caught up in a space tear. We need to find dilithium crystals to escape at warp speed, and there's some on the planet below. So yeah, it's like an episode of Star Trek from way back when William Shatner was making that series rock. Fun fact, this game has a few different releases. The PC one's actually pretty cool. At the time of the NES thriving, Star Trek had a few movies out, namely Star Trek The Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home. But the show that mattered was Star Trek The Next Generation. There were a few games, but the NES one is the one that mattered. We play as a group of cadets who are placed in a simulation, given missions by Captain Jean-Luc Picard. We can have missions where we explore, where we beam down to alien planets, even missions where we go up against Romulans. And while it might seem that there isn't much to do, there actually is. There's an underlying plot to prevent a war with the Romulans, and we do that by getting evidence, recovering scientists who are lost, and taking back stolen alien artifacts. It's pretty cool for what it is. You know George Lucas? Sure you do. The man behind Star Wars, the one other franchise that he created that still thrives to this day, using the same exact guy to do it. Harrison Ford. The franchise began in 1981 with Raiders of the Lost Ark, then Temple of Doom, and then finally The Last Crusade, all of which were bangers. Then we had a TV show. It was known as The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, starring Sean Patrick Flannery, and while I'm sure the TV show was great, the game that was created for it was dog shit. It's a side-scrolling platformer where we go to places Indiana Jones would have gone, like Egypt, Mexico, China, the US, and other places that are obnoxious as fuck to navigate. We have to recover lost artifacts using our equipment to solve puzzles, and while I did check it out for a 10 games episode regarding the best and worst NES TV show based games, no thank you. Have you ever watched roller derby? I've never seen it, but I know the idea of it. That is to say, a group of angry women, one or two of which might be powerhouse butch lesbians, sling each other around a rollerblade course trying to knock souls out of their bodies like they're playing full contact Mario Kart with broken shoulder pads and broken dreams. At least that's what I thought. Apparently there was a TV show in the late 80s that brought the joy of roller derby to the masses, and yes, it was 100% scripted, and I tried to watch just one episode of it, and it was obnoxiously funny, but that didn't last long. It only had one season. But the cool thing is there was an NES game created by Konami, and I actually kind of like it. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where each of the coaches of the teams you would see on the show were the bosses, which I thought was pretty cool. For anyone who doesn't know, there was an arcade version as well, but I've only checked out the NES version. It's kind of cool though, and I do think you should check it out. And that's it, all of the TV show-based NES games out there. Do you have any positive or negative memories about any of these games? Feel free to let the community know down in the comment section below. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly aligns with the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.